Shalom Aleichem. Today is Yom Hamishi b'Shabbat, the first day of Hanukkah, Kaf He b'Chislev Toshin Peh, the 26th of December 2024. Minyan Holmov. We are in Mishneh Torah, the Rabbeinu Hagadol Rambam, Zichron Livracha, Hilchot Avoda Zarah v'Hilchot HaGoyim, Perek Yud Aleph, Halacha Aleph. Rambam says, En holachim v'Hilchot HaGoyim, v'lo middamim lahem, lo b'malbush, v'lo b'se'ar, v'chayotze bahen. We are not allowed, it is assumed in Torah, as we shall see, to emulate the ways of the Goyim. Not in terms of dress or hairstyle, and as we shall see other things as well. Shene'emar v'lo telechu v'chukot hagoy. V'ne'emar v'chukotzehem lo telechu. V'ne'emar hisham elecha pen tinokesh acharehem. So Rambam quoted here three separate pesukim. Rambam says, Hakol be'inyan ehad hu mazhir. All these pesukim are the thrust of these various pesukim is one. Hakol be'inyan ehad hu mazhir. Shilo yidame lahem. Ela yeh ha-Yisraeli muvdal mehem u'yadua' b'malbusho u'v'sha'ar ma'asao k'mo shehu muvdal mehem b'mad'o u'b'de'otho. A Jew is to be different and separate in all areas of life. B'malbusho u'v'sha'ar ma'asao, his dress and all other things. Just as he is very different from them in terms of his outlook and his understanding of reality. The word madda'o has to do with the general outlook and ideology, and de'otho refers to his character and his behavior. V'chen hu omer v'avdil etchem min ha'amim. And this is precisely the aim of the Torah, says the Rambam, as the pasuk states, and I shall separate you, I shall make you different from the other nations. And this, of course, is the first, most obvious, and most fundamental reason for anti-Semitism. Because before you even get into the claims about killing Yeshua HaNothri, for example, or anything of that sort, because it is human nature to like and wish to associate with people who are similar to oneself. That is the natural inclination of all human beings. And no matter how hard various institutions or people or ideologies try to speak about an idea that used to be common, at least, you hear it much less nowadays, a melting pot or something like that. No matter how much people insist that the world can be different, the basic fact is it cannot be different and will not be different. So Jews, by being different, and we have no choice but to be different, as we've just read, and it is our purpose and our aim to be different. Therefore, it is not surprising that other nations, particularly when we live amongst them, will dislike us. And I think this is the norm rather than the exception. As we see nowadays, for example, the reticence to express anti-Semitic views in the wake of the Second World War and the Holocaust has worn off, as we can see quite plainly. It took about 3 generations, but it wore off. 2.5, perhaps, maybe only 2. But now it's clearly no longer a factor. It is also important to mention that the entire thrust of Reform Judaism, which began in the late 18th century, the Minyanam in Germany, the entire thrust of that movement and that ideology was, was to hide and to deny this difference, and in all its aspects. They tried to emulate what went on in the Beth Knesset, in the synagogue, and make it more similar to that which went on in the church in terms of an organ or what have you, all sorts of practices. In terms of dress, of course, Jews all of a sudden got rid of their beards and things of this nature. It was precisely in order to be less different and to be more like the surrounding Gentile population that Reformed Judaism came into existence. It didn't begin as a religious movement or a reformation in the religious sense. There was an ulterior motive. And that was the motive. The motive was to be as similar to the surrounding Gentile population as possible. Rambam continues, Halakha Beth, Lo yilbash or lo yilbosh b'malbush hamiyuchad lahem. And therefore, a Jew may not dress in a manner which is unique or specific to another nation or Gentile population. He should not wear his hair in the same manner as they do. He should not, for example, shave his head on the sides, leaving the hair on top of the head. An extreme example of that is the Mohican style haircut. But in general, this also is now popular amongst many people. Even though it wasn't perhaps a few decades ago, now it's much more common. So we see these things do not disappear. It's interesting. These fashions, these styles, these things do not disappear. There are cyclical phenomena. They appear, and they disappear, and they reappear. But these styles seem to be built into almost into human DNA. So that kind of a haircut, Rambam says, "Waza nikra belorif." This is what Hazar referred to as a bilurith, which is having the hair in the middle or the top part of the head and shaving the hair basically everywhere else. ולא יגלח השיער מכנגד פנו מאוזן לאוזן ויניח הפרע מלאחרו כדרך שהם עושים. In other words, to shave the head, the hair at the front part of the head, and grow the hair only at the back, sometimes into some kind of a pigtail or something like that, as I think was common in Chinese civilizations, for example, and others. ולא יבנה מקומות כבניין היכלות של עבודה זרה, כדי שייכנסו בהם רבים כמו שהם עושים. In other words, to emulate their architectural style. That also should not be done. וכל העושה אחת מאלו וכיוצא בהן לוקה. And these are not midivre soferim, says Rambam. These things are all included within the prohibition of lo telechu b'chukot hagoy, or b'chukotahem lo telechu. And this is a very central part of all these halachot that we have been studying, and that is why Rambam labeled this section of halachot in Mishneh Torah not just Hilchot Avoda Zarah, but Hilchot Avoda Zarah v'chukot hagoyim. So this is clearly a very fundamental, very important aspect of this entire subject and of the Torah in general. As we saw, the Rambam brought a number of pesukim. Now, it goes without saying that it's not only in terms of external, outward manifestations, such as one's clothing, one's hairstyle, etc. This also applies even more obviously and more fundamentally to one's attitudes and assumptions about all manner of things. So if a person ostensibly lives according to the Torah, in other words, he keeps Shabbat, shall we say, but in terms of his ideological orientation, he assumes that he lives according to the assumptions of a surrounding Gentile society. This is just as serious, in fact, more serious. And therefore, a Jew always has to ask himself the question, is this particular point of view, this idea, this ideology, or this belief, is it in consonance with the Torah, or does it run against the grain of the Torah? What is the provenance of this belief or this idea? That is the first question that a Jew should always ask themselves about any concept or idea or assumption that people make. And the way to discover if this is an idea or a concept that a Jew should subscribe to or not is to discover this by looking into the Torah in a completely objective and intellectually honest manner, and there one will be able to discover, one hopes, one assumes, what is true and what is not true, what is in line with the Torah and what is not.
Rabbi?
Yes.
Where does one draw the line with such things? And clearly, Goyim need to wear clothes and put their hair up in certain ways, and so do Jews. So.
Well, you would think it would be obvious that Goyim should wear clothes, but there seems to be less obvious than it used to be, shall we say, if we compare the state of Western civilization today to, shall we say, Victorian England. It's apparently much less obvious. But yes, I take your point. Go on. That too. Actually, that's a very good example. That's a perfect example. I would not have to say what I'm about to say if we were recording this in 1861, shall we say. But at the present time, the assumptions of most, if not all, of Western society and civilization today, when it comes to dress codes, is completely unacceptable from a Torah perspective. But many people, including Jews who refer to themselves as Orthodox Jews, seem not to understand this, not to appreciate this fact. How do you make this clear to them? Well, no one guarantees, first of all, that you will succeed in making anything clear to anybody, but you can point to various explicit halachot, and as always, the halachot encapsulate the essence of the Torah hashkafa, the Torah point of view or ideology. So it should be obvious to Jews that just because women in the Western world dressed in a certain way, that in no way means, in fact, it probably certainly means the opposite, that we cannot act in that fashion. But many people do not seem to recognize this, which of course is a result of being immersed in a foreign culture, civilization, or lack thereof, whereby the most obvious things are no longer obvious.
My question was less regarding tzniut and more
All right.
styles in general. I mean, non-Jews wear jeans, but they also wear suits. So they also wear strange costumes. So where does one draw the line between looking like a goy and behaving like one, or simply wearing clothes that other people in the world wear?
I do not think you could make a case that wearing jeans is asur min adin, that it's forbidden, that it's hukot hagoy, because they are widely worn by various types of people all over the world for various reasons in different situations. But, for example, the strange fashion of wearing jeans which are ripped and frayed and what have you, which I believe, so I understand, you pay more for, but per hole or per rip or something like that. That is, I think, a clear example of Hukot HaGoyim. That is a strange, unusual fashion, which it makes no sense, after all, to buy jeans or any garment which comes with ready-made holes and rips, etc. in it. So that's obviously an attempt to be like somebody else, or to follow someone else's notion of what is hip, or what is cool, or what is fashionable. And that is something I think a Jew may not do, for example. Now, in terms of suits, etc., well, or in terms of dress in general, this is a very serious question. Ideally, Am HaTorah should have Mabush Shel Torah. The Jewish nation should have its own dress code, its own style, its own fashion criteria. We have not yet, as a people or as a religious community, we have not yet come up with such a thing, apparently. certainly not something which is authentically Jewish. There are various types of there are various dress codes which exist in the Haredi world, all of which were once upon a time nothing to do with Jews or being religious or being Yirei Hashem. They were all direct and obvious copies of what was going on, what was worn, what was considered acceptable or admirable, desirable in various societies. I mean, take for example what is called a frak, which is a particular kind of long black, usually black, coat or jacket instead of a short jacket, shall we say. So wearing a suit but with a long coat, but not just a regular long coat, but it's a very specific kind with 2 buttons in the back and a long slit down the middle and all these various specifications. Well, we know exactly who used to wear those things and how they came about. You can go to a classical music concert and see for yourself how the conductor and others there are dressed, and you see immediately where that came from. So that which was acceptable in Vienna or in Budapest or in who knows where 200 years ago or 150 years ago or whatever it was, somehow became somehow morphed into a particularly Jewish style of dress. That's clearly not the case. Just to indicate how non-Jewish it is, even in purely halachic terms, there are posakim who discussed whether a frak, because of that long slit in the back, it has in fact 4 corners, has arbak, and the 4th is hayab the tzitzit. I've never seen anyone wear a frak with the tzitzit on it, but this is discussed very seriously by some of the posakim, not just today, going back some generations already. So it was clearly not designed by Jews or for Jews. Really what we need to do, we need to come up with an authentic form of a Jewish dress for men and women. That is what we should be aiming for. This is more difficult to do when living amongst Goyim. It should be easier to do when living in our own land, under our own sovereign rule. It should be easier. But here too, we are called. We need to call upon a certain kind of courage and vision to achieve that end, I believe, which apparently is still lacking. But we should at least be aware of it, very aware of it. And that is one of the reasons to learn these halachot. Yes.
Just in summary, you mentioned some element of irrationality and some element of something that's very distinctly non-Jewish. So, barring those 2, it would be permissible. So, for instance, something very irrational would be, like you mentioned, ripped jeans or perhaps many strange formal accessories that people wear. And, the distinctly non-Jewish category would be like something along the lines of a Japanese robe or something.
Japanese
robe, like a kimono or something like that. I don't know. Something that Jews don't wear. But apart from that, there wouldn't necessarily be an issue.
The main point is as much as possible, where possible, and as much as possible, not to try and fit in or copy their styles and their fashions and their ways of doing things. That's the general rule. As you said, you cannot say that because Goyim wear a robe, that a Jew cannot wear a robe, or because Goyim wear a hat and Jews cannot wear a hat. That's obviously not what we're discussing. But when there are certain things which are more obviously an expression of a certain culture or mindset, then those things, I think, are clearly included within this Isur, within this prohibition. But in order to achieve a situation, whereas Rambam said in the first halakha, שהישראלי יהיה מובדל מהם וידוע במלבושו ושאר מעשו, in order to achieve that, we have to come up with an authentic Jewish dress code. So in a kind of perverse way, some people will tell you that, I'm referring to Haredim, they will tell you, well, we have such a dress code. But the truth is that the way that your average Bahur Yeshiva, shall we say, in so-called Litai Yeshiva dresses today is precisely the way any self-respecting gangster dressed in Chicago in 1929. There's no difference. It's a clear copy of something else, which some Jews decided to stick with and not budge from that particular dress code, which at that time they had adopted from the Goyim. And the world moved somewhere else, went a different way, and it turns out, therefore, interestingly enough, almost paradoxically, that this is a Jewish dress code, but it's actually not. So it's not the ideal that we should be aiming for. We should be aspiring to something else. So it seems to me. The most obvious example, again, is ask yourself the question: do any of these dress codes, Haredi dress codes, lend themselves naturally to, shall we say, the mitzvah of tzitzit? The answer is no. Clearly, no. Quite the opposite. It's not by accident, by the way, that the concept of a talit katan was called a talit katan, or talit katana, grew up in France and in Germany, originally in France, at the suggestion of the Baal Asmav, Rabbeinu Moshe Mikusi, מגדולי בעלי התוספות, תלמיד of Rabbeinu Ariya Zaken, because he pointed out that the clothes that we wear, which are like the Goyim, do not really allow us to perform the mitzvah of tzitzit properly. So we have to come up with some other stopgap measure in order to perform the mitzvah of tzitzit bichlal. In other words, this is not a new phenomenon. This goes back 800 years or more, at least, probably much longer. So you see that it is a fact, and it's also not at all surprising that Gentile dress codes do not lend themselves to a Jewish lifestyle. Should that surprise anyone? No. What should the obvious conclusion be? It should be that we should be wearing something quite different. All right. We continue. Halacha Gimel or Bet. Goy שהיה מסתפר מישראל. כיוון שהגיע קרוב לבלוריתו שלו 3 אצבעות לכל רוח שומט את ידו. In other words, here the chashash is, we're talking about a Jewish barber. Goy shaya mistaper mi Yisrael. The Israel is the barber, and the Goy came to this barber to have his hair cut in a certain style, which is connected to Avoda Zarah, which was a common practice. So we know, for example, about medieval monks and their various hairstyles. So not only is the Jew not allowed to wear his hair that way, he should also not facilitate a non-Jew wearing his hair in that way. And therefore, once he is reach that point where if he continues to cut this person's hair in this manner, it will turn out to be the kind of belorith, the kind of hairstyle that is associated with Avoda Zarah. Shomet et yodo. He must literally stop the haircut and end his services at that point. I don't know how that will go down with the client, with the customer. I'm not quite sure. Probably not too well. Israel shaya karov lemalchuth v'sarach leshem lifnei melachehem. Now, as for a Jew who he is required to appear before the goyim, before the king or his ministers and government officials. V'haya lo genai lemi shelo yidameh lahem. And he would be considered. It's basically not. It's untenable that he appear before them in a completely different fashion, and he's doing these things. First of all, very often he's representing the Jewish community vis-a-vis the government officials, and so this is a sha'at dahak. This is a kind of ones, and ones rahamana patre. He has no choice, and therefore reze mutar lidbosh kemalbushim shelahem ulevalech keneged panav kederech shehem osim. He may do some of these practices in order to be able to fulfill his role as a representative of the Jewish people, of the Jewish community. All right. Halacha Daled. En menahashim kagoyim. Shneimar lo tenahashu. We are not allowed to engage in any manner of sorcery or witchcraft or superstitious behaviors, beliefs, and claims. So Rambam explains, Kesad hu nichush. So what is this nichush that we are not allowed to be involved in? Kechon elu she'omrim, such as those who say, who believe, sheho'in v'nafela piti mipi, seeing that this piece of bread fell from my mouth, or nafal makli miyadi, or I was walking along and my walking stick fell from my hand. Eni holech lemekom peloni hayom. This is a sign in some way that I should not do a certain thing. I should not go to a certain place today. She'im elech en hafasai na'asim. And if I were to continue as usual, I would not succeed. In other words, this is a bad day. This is it's a superstition. A superstition that such meaningless, coincidental occurrences have some significance. This is called nichush, and this is something we are not allowed to believe in or to entertain. Such a belief, such a practice, we are not allowed to entertain. Seeing that I was walking along and the road, the path, in the field, whatever it was, and a fox crossed not far from me on my right. We see that a fox was always considered to be sly, and therefore if a fox walked by on your right hand side, why on the right, I do not know, but this was an indication that you should better to stay at home today, because otherwise you will be bamboozled or deceived or misled by some sly operator, some con man or something like this. These are all ridiculous beliefs, which are of course just plain superstition. וכן, similarly, אלו ששומעים צפצוף העופות, ואומרים יהיה כך ולא יהיה כך, this has to do with auguries, people who would claim to know that which is about to happen based on the chirping, the song of the birds, or therefore such and such is an indication. Tov la'asoth davar ploni, it is a good day for doing such and such. V'ra la'asoth davar ploni, or the opposite. V'chen elu shomrim, or those beliefs, those ideas, those people who claim shahot tanagol zeh shekara arvith. This chicken, this cock, was making the sounds that a cock usually makes in the early morning, and was doing so in the evening. Therefore, it's a good idea to slaughter this chicken now. Or this female chicken sounds like a male chicken, and therefore you should slaughter it. Or a person who says to himself the following: if such and such happens, based on, there's no obvious connection between this thing that he refers to and doing something else, but he just makes such a connection in his mind based on whatever superstition or hunch he may have. As we know from what it describes in the Torah and Sefer Bereshit, that Eliezer, the servant, the faithful servant of Avraham Avinu, who was sent to find a wife for Yitzhak, and he said to himself, as is mefurash in the Torah and Bereshit, Perek Kaf Daled, that the woman who responds to his question, his request in a certain way, is the right woman. All such things are asur. And a person who acts upon such ideas, such notions, is guilty of transgressing the isur min Torah of loth nahashu, and is lokeh min Torah, literally. So these things are very serious and very real. So the isur and the ideas which underpin this isur are very real, not something that one can choose not to take seriously. And therefore, along the same lines, Halacha Hey, Mishe Amar Dira Zo Shebaniti, this home that I built, Siman Tov Hayatha Alai, was very lucky. What does that mean, lucky? Isha Zo Shenosati Ubehema Zo Shekaniti Mevorechet Hayatha. In other words, things have gone very well for me since I built this home, or since I married this woman, or since I purchased this cow, or what have you. This led to me becoming wealthy. It was a result of that action. Again, no obvious connection at all. Obviously, if a person makes an astute business decision based on relevant knowledge to, buy a certain stock or invest in a certain project, because he understands that this is likely to be a profitable concern, then that's nothing to do with what we're discussing here. The whole point here is that there is no obvious rational connection between those events or those happenstances and some other outcome. The person who says to a child, What pasuk did you learn today in school? Ima malu pasuk min haberachot, and if he happens to quote a pasuk min Torah, which explicitly expresses ideas to do with baracha, with success, with blessing. Yismach v'yomar zeh siman tov. This is a positive sign that what I'm considering doing, I should go ahead and do. Kol elu v'chayotze bahem mutar. That is mutar. Why? Ho'il v'lo kiwen ma'asa v'lo nimna mila'asot. In other words, you didn't choose to do something or refrain from doing something because of this pasuk, or this child quoted to you. You already decided that you are going to do such and such for relevant and cogent reasons. And when you happen to speak to this child and you asked him what he learned today, and he says to you, well, today we learned the pasuk Baruch tiyeh mikol ha'amim. So you're allowed to take that as some kind of positive indication. We're also allowed not to, but it's not asur. הואיל ולא כיוון נעשה ולא נמנע מלעשות, אלא עשה זה סימן לעצמו לדבר שכבר היה. This is some kind of, you take it as some kind of affirmation of that which was already done or decided. הרי זה מותר. That is mutar. In other words, deciding upon a course of action or refraining from a course of action based on such indications would be asur. But with the avad, lahar ma'aseh, retroactively seeing something as being a siman tov after the event, it's not asur to do that. It's not at all clear that it is so, that it indicates anything, but it's not forbidden to take encouragement, shall we say, from such an occurrence. And perhaps it really is a siman. In other words, a siman in the sense that you happen to meet this particular child and he happened to learn that particular pasuk, and yesh bazeh mishum hashgacha mesuyemet. That may be. Rambam didn't say it's definitely so, but he also said that it's not asur to assume or to think that it might be so. All right, so we'll end here for today. Heyu beruchim, hizku v'yamas levavchem kol hamiyahalim l'Adonai shalom u'nisachon al kol oyevenu mibayit u'michutz.